Hey everyone, my name is Audrey and welcome to my channel. Today I'm excited to share with you the Lukas Aquarell 1862 watercolors. I am an ambassador for Jerry's Artorama and I was sent this product for free. Earlier in 2020, I was sent the smaller set and I've used it almost exclusively. Basically, I love it. So even with this 48 color set, this video is going to be less of a product review and more of a, hey, let's see how these 48 colors look, how they swatch, how they lift, and then I'll do a short painting at the end. All right, so Lukas is a German brand and they have paints available in half pans, kind of like what you see here and then in this set. They also come in full size pans, which is basically, the size of two of these put together. And then they also have, this is 24 milliliter tubes, I believe. Yeah, 24 milliliter tubes. Lukas has 70 available colors and then 48 of them are single pigment, which means that they're going to be really vibrant colors. I'm not sure how many of those colors that are single pigment are also in this set, but we'll open it up and see. All right, so let's go ahead and open up this packaging. Set that aside. All right, so first of all, we just have this really lovely packaging. It's really secured. You have the metal case up here at the top. It looks very similar to my smaller one. It's obviously just, twice as big. The mixing wells are obviously a lot larger. And then they also have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 smaller wells on the other side. So the only thing I don't like about metal pans is that sometimes the edges are super sharp and I wish I knew of a better way to protect your fingers or any other delicate surfaces or just anything from these razor sharp edges. That's my only downside because on my smaller palette, all of the metal edges are actually protected. It has a slight lip. But this palette, for some reason, it does have the lip on these sides, but then you get to the corner and then you get to these edges on the center part and there's no lip. So that's my only critique so far. Yeah, I think just when you're working with metal pans, just watch out for that. I mean, how often are we grabbing it, right here from the edge? But, you just never know. All right, on the other side of the packaging, you have all of the 48 colors. They're already beautifully laid out, in its little place. Now, I may or may not arrange some of these colors, and I might do that for a few reasons. Like number one, I don't ever use white watercolor. Adding white to watercolor paint, at least for me, it tends to sort of dull the colors a little bit. It doesn't, you can use it to make it more pastel. It doesn't work quite the same way as it is with gouache. So I probably won't even have the white, like even in here. I might just take it out right now. And then secondly, I can't really base the color of the paint on the color that's on the packaging. I've learned from experience that, when you paint it, sometimes the color does look different. And so even though right now, at first glance, it might look like it makes sense, but actually when I paint it, I might not like the way that it's currently arranged. Lastly, I think for this set, because there are so many colors, I think I want to arrange them so that I have maybe the warm colors on one side and the cool colors on the other. And not just saying that, okay, all the yellows and oranges and reds on one side, but rather the warm tones of the colors. So if there's a warm yellow and a cool yellow, I'll probably separate them and do one yellow on one side and the other yellow on the other side. I don't normally arrange my paints that way, but I feel like when you have this many colors, it might be easy to forget, the properties of the colors, especially the warm and cool tones, unless you've memorized your swatch chart, right? So this way, by just separating it warm and cool, or as best as you can, then that will really help when you are actually painting. Okay, so let's go ahead and take them out of its little case. Oh, if you're wondering what is holding this together, basically this will pop in this metal case right here. So it's just gonna go right there in the middle, like so. Like I said, let's take them out of the metal case and I'll show you what I do next. So as you're taking them out, you do want to be careful that you don't bend this little metal tab back too far. I mean, you could, they are, bendable and moldable. You can bend them back, but yeah, but I found that it's really hard to get that really tight snap once you've bent it too far back. There are some colors here that I have used before and that are in my previous set. I do like this range of reds and pinks and purples. I know all you need to do to make pink is just water down your red, but sometimes it's nice just having the pigmented color already there for you. Now, these are some colors that I haven't used a lot, even in my previous set. Like I have this, well, May green I actually did use quite a lot, but like the turquoise in my 20 color set or so, I like barely touched. So I have a feeling that even in this 48 color set, it won't get used all that often. But I see that kind of actually as a good thing, because then the less colors you have, the more flexibility that you have actually. So if you're looking at my 48 color set and you're like, oh, I wish I had all those colors, don't be envious. Because right now I'm trying to take all these colors out and it's really tedious. 2 more to go. All right. Finally. Okay, so I'm gonna just set this aside. All right, so like I said earlier, Lukas is a German-based company, but these are made in England, and it says so right there on the packaging. I'm just gonna pick up a couple randomly to see how many of them are single pigment. So this is the lemon yellow primary, which is usually a single pigment color, and it just says PY3. Now, a secondary color like a green or a purple will probably have multiple pigments. So this one that says sap green, it has 2. So this one has PY153 and PG7. I'm sure we'll learn a lot more about the pigment and things like that, but the helpful PDF that I'll link in the description below, that tells you a lot of other characteristics such as opacity. So whether the color is, opaque, semi-transparent, semi-opaque, or very transparent. Now, because these are all watercolors, they should all be mostly transparent. They shouldn't ever be completely opaque, maybe besides the black color. But on that PDF, it also tells you the light fastness rating. So light fastness refers to how well it's going to stand the test of time. So especially when you're displaying it at your home, as long as it's out of direct sunlight and behind a glass cover, it should last, a very, very long time. So I think the international scale is like from 1 to 8 or something like that. And I think all of Lukas's colors fall within the 6 to 8 range. So 6 is like very good and 8 would be like outstanding or excellent. So they all fall within that range. So basically it's guaranteeing you that your paintings are going to last a long time and the colors won't fade. Now these labels are pretty important. So again, they tell you obviously the name of the paint, but also, either on the back or something like that, it should tell you the pigment name. And again, this one is PY3. I'm not sure why, but some of these actually don't have the pigment name on the back. Yeah, like this purple one, it doesn't have a pigment name anywhere. It does say PG2, but that's not correct because P stands for pigment and G stands for green. So that makes no sense because this is a purple color, so it should be PV something, if anything. And so there's no name, but that's okay. I'll just look at the PDF. This could just be, older packaging. So since this packaging label is inconsistent, I'm going to go ahead and unwrap them and then use my Sharpie to write on the side the number that it comes with. So this number is going to be specific to the brand, right? I'm not going to look up 1021 on a different brand and then expect to find this same lemon yellow color. Oh, and then the stars here, this is what tells you the light fastness rating. So when I label it, I am going to label the short side because that's what's going to be facing, you know, out when I put it in the metal tin. Like so. I am glad I have this color. This is a yellow ochre. I was missing this in my previous set, so I'm very happy I have this one. I like yellow ochre because it tends to be more opaque than other colors. And it's a great color to use when you're just trying to, like, I don't know, just like darken up certain areas. This one's kind of pretty. This is a gold ochre. I wonder how this will swatch. This is a Naples yellow and it says reddish. I don't think I've ever used a reddish Naples yellow. This Indian yellow looks really pretty too. Wow, it looks very red, or I mean orange. So this color is a cadmium red light. So anytime you have cadmium or that word, which is actually an element, you know, a metal element in your paint, you want to be careful because they are known to be toxic. And it's not like you're going to be, you know, ingesting this paint, but if you have young ones, you know, painting with your stuff or maybe touching it, just be careful. This is a permanent red. I have this in my other set too. It's a very warm red. Oh, alizarin crimson. This is another one that I didn't have, but I've always wanted to have. This pigment is PR 176. Wow, this one is super dark. I don't know if you can see this, but it's like, it looks almost black. So I think this is why you have to be careful and label them and put them in its right place, because if I were to put this color right next to the black, I wouldn't be able to tell which one's which. Oh, ultramarine. This is another one that I really wish I had in my other set. I don't know why it wasn't in there, but this is the PB29, which is a very, very good color. Again, if you want to use that and a burnt sienna color to make a beautiful grayish color. I use that all the time, so I'm really glad I have this. This is the ultramarine blue deep, and then right next to it is the ultramarine light. So I wonder how, you know, how different they'll be. I mean, I'm just assuming like one is maybe just a deeper bluer color, or maybe it's more staining, like less transparent than the other one. I don't know if anyone else has this much trouble with these like I do. I feel like there has to be an easier way to take all this off, but all right, now that all the pans are labeled, I want to swatch them. So I actually created this giant chart and you can download this on my Ko-fi shop if you want. but I basically wrote down the color name, the color number, and then the pigment number. Now I kept the order that the paints came in exactly the same. But remember how I mentioned in the beginning that I might separate them by warm tones and cool tones. So after I swatch, I'll get a better sense of how the colors look. Now, if you're very detail oriented, that might really bother you, because then what you have on your palette, right, after you put your colors in, is not going to match your chart. So if that really bothers you, then feel free to, rearrange as you like, or rearrange the pans first and then swatch them and then make, a couple more tweaks here and there. As for me, it doesn't really bother me. So I'm gonna keep the order the way it is, swatch them, and then move the paints around as I see fit. Okay, the first thing I'm gonna do is just set these pans just inside the palette, but without the metal insert. Because once I put it in the metal insert, I might be too lazy to rearrange them. So I'm just gonna place them in here, and then this way it'll be easier to, move them around if I want to. And this way I'm not getting my, work surface dirty. So I usually use a spray bottle to keep my paints wet. So I'm gonna go ahead and just give a quick spritz to all of the colors, or maybe just the first 2 rows so far. Yeah, and even just a little bit of water is already activating the paints. So that just goes to show you, just how wet they are already. They don't look wet because they don't have a, there are some watercolor brands that uses honey as a binding agent. So Lukas doesn't do that. They have a different kind of wetting agent that I actually have to do some more research about. But yeah, but it's already getting really wet. So I'm excited. Now remember, this first one is going to be white, so I'm just going to leave it blank. Next, the first color that we're going to test is the lemon yellow, and I'm using a size, let's see, this is a flat brush. This is a 1/2 inch flat brush. So let's go in there with the lemon yellow. It's a little hard to maneuver the paint only because, it's kind of sitting in there loosely. So I'm getting the darkest value possible here up at the top. And I'm just going to wash out my brush and then fill in the rest of it. Now, different people have, different preferences for how they swatch things. I do like to show a gradient so I know what it looks like when it's, at its full value versus when it's at its lighter value. And then later when I do the lift test, I'm going to do it at the darkest value. All right, let's keep going. I do like how I don't have to really, dig my brush in there for very long, and it picks up the color so nicely, so readily. That's a really pretty color. And you might be hearing me saying that phrase a lot. All right, permanent yellow. This is a really great color for, mixing. And you'll notice that this pigment name, PY155, you're gonna see that quite often when we get to some of these colors, like in the greens and in the browns, and how it was used for mixing. It's a very, true type of yellow. So it's not quite, what I mean by true is like neutral, right? It's not quite warm, it's not quite cool. It's just right there in the middle. So that's why it's great for mixing. Now I can already tell, right, the cadmium yellow light is on the warmer side and the lemon yellow is on the cooler side. So right now, actually, why don't I go ahead and start separating that? Well, maybe I'll separate them later. I don't want to lose track of where I am in my palette. Okay, moving on. this color, gold ochre, I was wondering if it was going to be more brown than anything. And now that I look at the pigment mixtures, it actually makes sense that it should be with the other earth colors. Yeah, it's got the PY42, which is a yellow ochre light, and it's got PR101, which is this English red light, or the English red deep down here, and then PBK7, which is just black. So I'm definitely going to move this gold ochre in with the earth colors. Okay, this color is really confusing because this color's name is permanent yellow deep, and maybe the word deep is the operative word here, but it looks more orange to me than anything, right? And this is definitely a reason why you can't always rely on the word name of the color, because it's definitely going to vary from brand to brand, right? One brand sap green is going to be very different probably from a different brand sap green. Like I forget which brand it is, but that brand's sap green actually has 3 colors mixed in, whereas Lucas's sap green only has 2 colors mixed in, the PY153 and PG7. Oh, this color is so vibrant. Just look at that. It just went on here so easily. It is so full of pigment. It is so beautiful. Love that color. And again, it's interesting that the name says cadmium red light, but then the pigment name, it's orange, PO20, O for orange. I'm not quite a pro at this, but I'm starting to kind of memorize the actual pigment numbers rather than the names, because it's better to compare the pigment numbers rather than the names, because again, it could be the same sap green could have wildly different mixtures. Now, so far out of these top 11, let's see, only 2 of them have multiple pigments. So far so good. Okay, let's keep going. I'm on to the cadmium red deep. I've never quite had a color like the Cinnabar red before, so it's just very interesting. Right, here's the alizarin crimson. And again, this is a very common color to use as well for mixing, whether it's mixing a black or a brown or a gray. So you're going to see this in other mixtures. Like for the brown, like let's see, like this burnt green earth and the burnt umber and the raw umber and the Payne's gray, right? They all have that PR176 in there. All right, this genuine rose color I actually own already. So I already know what this color looks like, and it is pretty. I have to say, I really like that indigo color. But what's interesting is that this mixture of pigments is exactly the same as this Payne's gray. So it'll be interesting how each of them swatch, because I'm sure it's just, just a tweaking of maybe a little bit more black or a little bit more red, just to get the right color. But yeah, that indigo color does remind me a lot of the Payne's gray, and perhaps you get to Payne's gray by just adding a little bit more black. This is another color where I feel like the name doesn't quite match the pigment, because the name says green yellow, but the pigment name is PY129. So technically it should be with the yellows. So that one I'll definitely be moving to. This May green color I'm actually familiar with. I have it in my current set. I like how bright it is. and yet still very pigmented. Sap green was one of my favorite colors when I was working with Winsor & Newton and the Shinhan professional watercolors. I love sap green, but I think this one I actually like the best. Because again, I think this has one less pigment. So the color is still really bright and vibrant. And it's not as dark as some other sap greens are. Yeah. This oxide of chromium or chromium oxide green, I actually love this color. So in my other set, I didn't have sap green, which was my other favorite green, but I did have this oxide of chromium. And yeah, I loved it so much. It's such a rich color. Like, look how thick that is. It's so opaque. It's so opaque. Oh, speaking of opaqueness or opacity, so that's one thing that I don't really test for, I guess, in my swatches. So some watercolorists or painters, like what they do, they draw, like a black line, somewhere along that little square rectangle, just to see how transparent or how opaque it is. So I don't really do that because I can already tell just usually at first glance, once I painted, whether it's going to be opaque or not. And I'm also just assuming in general that most watercolors are, quite transparent. None of them are going to be, completely opaque except for, like black. So that's why I don't test for it, but it's not like it's a bad thing if you do. I don't have this green in my current palette or my old palette, and I really like that. Okay, I know I didn't really stop to look at how many of these colors are single pigments, but here on the second line, yeah, there's only one that's a multiple pigment, which is this indigo. And then on this third line, let's see, most of the greens are going to be some kind of mixture. So as you would expect, all of these, except for the oxide of chromium, these two, except for the cobalt green and oxide chromium, these four are all mixtures. But so far, they only have 2 colors, so not too bad. All right, let's keep going with the last row. All right, that's it for the greens, and even out of these 3 colors, only one of them are multi-pigment. And again, it's still only 2 colors. So yeah, I'm quite impressed with how many single pigment colors there are. And yeah, this phthalo green is also a very popular color to use in mixing as well. So now let's get into the earth colors. All right, so here we are looking at, these 3 colors that all have the same 3 pigments all mixed in. So it's very interesting to see how they're swatching, because all it takes is just a slight modification of one of the 3 pigments, and then you get a different color. All right, so that's all of the colors. And yeah, I really like how they're drying. Remember that watercolors always dries a little bit lighter. So even the indigo, even though I loved how it first laid down, look how much lighter it dries. Same thing with the Payne's Gray. It went on really dark. Same thing with the Ivory Black. But then as it sort of settles into the paper, the pigment is going to dry a little lighter. So what I'm going to do now is kind of rearrange these colors and then put them in my metallic insert. I'm going to set aside this chart so that I can let it dry completely before I do the lift test. And in the meantime, we'll paint something together. So I'm basically putting my cooler colors on the left side and then the warmer colors on the right. Actually, you know what? I'm going to put my warmer colors just on these 2 rows, and then cooler colors on the top 2 rows. That's how I'll do it. Okay, now I'm just gonna put them in the insert. Just make sure to, fold back the little tabs so that your pan locks into place. All right, so I'm all done. Go ahead and put it in the palette. All right, while I'm waiting for my chart to still dry, I'm gonna go ahead and just paint something really simple, and then we'll be ready for the lift test. So here's another look at the palette. So basically all the colors on the left half are like the warmer tones, and then on the right side are the cooler tones. Now I could still be off and wrong about some of them, but I'm not too worried. I actually really like the way that this looks. I wonder how it's going to actually play out in real life, because again, I've never had a palette with this many colors. I'm pretty sure that over time, I'm going to focus on just a handful, because even with this set here, I have about 20 colors or so. I probably use 8, maybe 10 at the most, quite frequently. And you can already tell, like this permanent red, carmine red, this burnt umber is like so used up. This chromium oxide green, like I said, I use that all the time. This is the Gamboge yellow. I'll actually miss that color. I don't know why it's not in this set. So I might have to buy a tube of Gamboge yellow just to fill it up or something. Or I actually have room for one more in this palette. So since I took the white out, yeah, so maybe that's what'll happen. But anyway, yeah, so you can already see that I don't use every single color, equally. And I'm pretty sure that's what's gonna happen with this set too. But we'll see. All right, well, I'm just going to paint some things that I know really well, which are roses. So I'll use mostly these cool reds over here, and then pair them with the warmer greens. All right, well, that was just a really quick rose painting. Now let's get back to our giant chart swatch and let's do a lift test. For this lift test, all I'm gonna do is just use a brush. I don't have a scrubbing type of brush, so I just have this 1/4 inch flat brush, and I'll just use this in clean water. Basically, lifting means, right, removing some of the paint from the paper. Now, some of these paints have, staining qualities, which means that it won't lift as easily. This also, of course, depends on, how much paint I actually put down. I feel like some of these colors, I could have put down a darker value, so that might affect the way that it's going to lift, but we'll see. I'm just gonna use maybe the top left corner just to be consistent. So all I'm going to do is just take some of that clean water, rub, and then dab, and then see how well it comes off. For the most part, you can see that I am able to lift most of the color. Some of the paints are quite staining, so that's okay. Most likely you're not going to be lifting, an hour after you painted. Usually it's kind of like a almost immediate thing. So if that's the case, you probably, you know, might not have as much difficulty. Oh, this one is very staining. I'm having a lot of trouble lifting up this dioxazine violet. The ultramarine blue is quite easy to lift. As well as the light version. I had a feeling this indigo is going to be hard, and it is. It's really stained on there. This cobalt turquoise was really easy to lift too. You can almost see the white of the paper. It's interesting, the cobalt colors, this cobalt green and the cobalt turquoise, were one of the easiest colors to lift aside from the ultramarines. I don't know if the name cobalt has anything to do with it, but yeah, it was very easy to lift. I barely had to scrub. All right, so you can see how well some of these colors lifted and how some of them didn't. It's very interesting to see. This is my first time really doing a lift test along with my swatches. And I learned a lot about these colors just from the get-go. So like, for example, if I ever use these blues, these indigo or the Prussian blue or even the Payne's gray, I have to be really sure of where I'm going to lay them because they are pretty much impossible to lift. It was kind of surprising that even some of the yellows, like the lemon yellow and even the cadmium yellow light, were quite difficult to lift too. So yeah, I learned a lot about these paints. Thanks again for joining me as I unboxed a Lukas Aquarell 1862, as I unwrapped, labeled, organized, swatched, lifted, and then painted. If you have a set of paints that you haven't really tested or done a color swatch or lift test, go ahead and try it out. It's never too late to learn about your supplies, and the more you know about them, the better you know how to use them. I'm definitely still going to use my other set because I have a lot of colors that still have a long way to go, and some colors that are in here that aren't in my 48 color set. You can also see that this palette is well loved. Thank you so much to Jerry's Artorama for sending me this beautiful set. I'll leave all of the links to these supplies below. Go ahead and like this video if you like the content. Maybe you're excited to try the Lukas brand, or maybe you're just a fan of color. Comment and tell me what kind of paints you're using, and maybe if you're ready to do a swatch and lift test. And don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Thank you so much for joining. I'll see you next time. Bye.